I want to talk about the ultra wealthy. And the reason why I want to talk about it is that it's a challenging problem. And so here's the challenging problem is that I think that the ultra wealthy actually should get entitled to all of the money that they actually earned, right? So this is on one side of the argument. Um, that they continue to earn and make more money because of the um, you know, whether it's luck, whether it's wise decisions, it doesn't really matter. But they have ultra wealth. And ultra wealth is, I would say today, anywhere of more than, say, $100 million US to your name, of invested stocks, things like that. Or, maybe that's a low barrier. um, let's say $1 billion or more to their name, and that they actually do control this, right? Something that they can get access to. Um, if they really, really wanted, they can sell everything and just have $1 billion to the name in cash. Now that's actually very technically difficult thing to do. Um, because they have so much wealth, they may actually, move the market, and there's going to be people that are going to monitor it. Um, that there's it's more complicated than simply just that. But let's just hypothetically say that they can get $1 billion to their name in cash at any given day because they have controlling interest of that. Not too many people exist that actually do have that amount of money, but let's say some arbitrary amount, I don't know, in the world, 10,000 people have more than $1 billion to their name. That's probably fairly close, I would say, my estimate. um, maybe it's a little high, maybe it's a little low, but somewhere around there. Now, the problem with that is that at one side, they are entitled to everything that they ever make, right? And again, it's through wise decisions or luck or whatever you want to say. They just have a $1 billion to their name. Now, the problem lies. So there's a two-sided problem here. The problem lies in that there is a upper limit in or minimum sort of threshold that you can buy literally anything that you ever want in this world that is humanly possible, and still continue to have wealth that grows, right? So let's say that $1 billion limit. Let's say you make 10% interest. That is on just investing in the stock market. Plenty of people do that. 10% is probably pretty roughly about there. Maybe they're a little higher, maybe they're a little lower in terms of the interest that they make. But let's say they're making $100 million a year. Well, this means that they can spend indefinitely $100 million a year, repeatedly every single year, on goods and services. So they can buy, a massive mansion, spend $100 million, and just continue to buy massive mansions, um, every every single year indefinitely, right? And have a whole host of mansions that are happening. And you know, you could buy, maybe a 747. I don't know what the exact amount is, but maybe a 747 is, $100 million. Maybe it's actually $1 billion. I doubt it, but maybe it's $100 million. So you can buy a 747. All of these amounts. What the challenge is that you are essentially above the possibility of, sort of mankind, right? Like there's no constraint or anything like that you could do. and continue to grow wealth and make more money. So that is one side of it. And it kind of warps everything, right? Like, it really makes it a sort of strange society to have this ultra wealth. Um, and it's because they can continue to just buy everything no matter what they do, and their money continues to grow indefinitely. I don't know what that upper limit is, but there is some limit. Say it's $1 billion, 10 billion, something like that. That'll just grow indefinitely, right? And there's a small group of people that will happen. Now, on the other side of this, and that sort of creates weird inequalities, and it's very difficult to handle because, um, do we create essentially another class if they manage their money well, and hopefully they will? Do we create a completely separate class that will never match them, right? A new type of royalty that will, they'll never ever be able to, will never be able to match it, right? It's like what royalty used to be, that they're almost godly. And that's changed a little bit over the years, but there's still some of that sense of it that they're godly, that they're fundamentally different. It's We're at a sort of a weird transition where people can actually do that now, become sort of gods in our society, which is really really strange. Right? They can grow up with nothing and be ordinary middle class folks and become godly, which is really really strange because their wealth will continue to grow indefinitely. And it's a relatively modern invention, right? Like it's not maybe a few hundred years old where people started actually doing this since the Industrial Revolution. It was a little bit more challenging before because we had a different way of organizing that was based on royalty, um, for the most part, right? Monarchies and things like that. Um, Not everywhere, but that was, generally, um, you could sort of view it that way. Now, on the other side, the challenge is okay, it sets this really weird thing that they are essentially above, they're above the law, they're above society, they can do whatever they want, and they will always be able to, um, live in this completely different class, right? Very different class. It's a weird, weird situation. And their family indefinitely will always be in that situation in perpetuity. Now, on the flip side of this, right? So that is clearly, maybe we want that sort of society, right? Like maybe we want completely different classes and, more of a monarchy and things like that. That is based on maybe how people at one point saved or made wise decisions or, were lucky or whatever, right? Like maybe we want that. And that is a fine choice, right? If we decide to do that, that's what we want. I think that's what we've defaulted into today, um, as a default decision. I'm not sure if that's exactly what we always want and what was intended in many countries. Now, the flip side of this is that what do we do, right? So let's say you actually don't want this to happen. The problem is that we live in, what is it, 250 some different countries around the world that are relatively sovereign from everybody else. So, at one way, you could say, as a country, you could say, well, I'm going to ban this behavior, or I'm going to put an upper limit and heavily tax people after this upper limit. Well, the problem is that these people can go and domicile in a different location relatively easy, right? So they just simply have to say, I'm living in this place, I'm going to pay taxes in this particular place, this particular country. And, countries are not all the same. They don't sort of see the way that everybody else wants. And of course, you want to, it seems wise at the face value or the sort of face validity of it to want billionaires to domicile in your country. And so there's a bit of a competition that happens. I don't think it's always beneficial, net benefit, But, I think people probably have that sort of concern and think about it. Now, what happens is that because that there is this, I don't know what it's actually called, but basically it prevents any country from actually taking this seriously and doing anything about it, because that there is a sort of mobility of human beings around the world, right? In terms of where they can domicile and what they want to do. And it really just depends on, if somebody stays in a certain country, it's just that's what their preference is, or they really just want to for whatever reason. I'm not saying that human beings don't want to just stay in a certain place, but if they're rational and smart, that they might actually move to different places and set up in different countries with the best tax laws for them. This creates a really weird predicament of how do you actually handle this? What do we actually do? Right? Because on one side, that's what many corporations do. They sort of pick the best um, location to headquarter in that is basically their best tax laws. But individuals now can do this because they have so much wealth that's behind their name. And I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not sure what the right answer is, but there's something that's uneasy about it. And I think, in one sense, there was this pledge that I think Bill Gates started it, the sort of billion dollar pledge or whatever, basically give away your money other than $1 billion to their name, which is incredibly smart. But that also encourages that only depends on whether that there's social norms with all of these ultra rich people to actually do that. And I don't think everybody abides by that. I think Bill Gates is very smart in the sense that he knows that this can't change, right? It's very difficult to change this, and the only way you can change it is some social norms um, with billionaires in terms of how you should act. But at the same time, this is a hard problem that I don't think there's a right answer to it. I think on both sides of this argument, I think both sides are actually pretty legit in terms of, yeah, on one side, you know, um, they did earn their money, right? However they earned it, whether through luck or whatever, or, hard work. It is hard work to actually make that much money, by the way. Um, on one side, they did earn their money and they're just like anybody else, right? So you should treat them just like anybody else. But on the other side, they're so wealthy that in perpetuity, they could fundamentally change everything. Everything for their family. They can move markets. They have enormous amounts of influence in terms of what they do. How do we actually handle this? I don't know. I think we're in a situation that is all relatively novel. This did happen, during the Industrial Revolution. This was, we had the Carnegies and stuff like that when there was social norms of giving a lot of it back. Not everybody did, obviously, but a lot of people did. And they, were they nice people? The Carnegies and all that kind of those folks, right? I don't know, right? Did they get it legitimate, all this money? I don't know. But, um, you know, many people had sort of the social norms of giving back. And the trouble today is that I think a lot of people are accruing this wealth so ridiculously quickly because there's many different economies and many different parts of the economy that is rapidly growing around the world that we haven't really set ourselves up in terms of thinking about what to actually do. And on top of it is that there's probably no political will to do anything about this because these people have that much money, they have enormous amounts of influence, and no politician will ever want to intervene and do anything about it. It's a complicated problem. with many different issues, but it's something to think about. And I think is fascinating. I wish that there was an answer, but um, it's just really, really complicated. All right, take care.